From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. The Congress debates, the Secretary threatens, and the public worries. So it is on the last weekend before the deadline by which Saddam Hussein is supposed to leave Kuwait. It is harder and harder to find people who believe that he will, voluntarily. There was certainly no mistaking the public change in the Secretary of State. The self-described somber negotiator of Geneva only 2 days ago was in the Middle East today, wielding a club. ABC's John McWethy was with Mr. Baker in Saudi Arabia.
In language tougher and more threatening than anything he has used in public, Secretary Baker this evening seemed to be pointing the troops he visited toward war, perhaps as early as next week if Saddam Hussein does not back down. He spoke to the men and women who fly and service the F-111 bombers that will probably be in the first waves if there is combat. Baker said he fears Saddam Hussein will try to stall as the crisis slides to the brink.
And our worry is that in his usual style, he will simply miscalculate where the brink is. And just so there is no misunderstanding whatsoever, let me be absolutely clear with all of you. We passed the brink at midnight on January 15th.
Baker said he could not yet tell the troops when a decision would be made about whether they would have to fight.
But I can tell you this: you will not have to wait much longer for an answer to that question.
That was a message these men and women, some of whom have been here for 5 months, wanted to hear, even if it means they must fight.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right. Officials say this will be Baker's last trip to the Persian Gulf until the crisis has been resolved. At this late hour, all the Gulf states are on board. A weary Secretary of State is tonight in Egypt, where he will privately tell this key but sometimes nervous ally what President Bush really plans to do if Saddam Hussein does not withdraw. If Baker's speech today is any guide, it will not be long before the whole world knows, too. John McWethy, ABC News, Cairo.
In Baghdad today, the influential Iraqi information minister flatly denied a report that Iraq plans a new peace offer sometime after the 15th of January. Saddam Hussein said again, no retreat. In Baghdad, ABC's Gary Shepard.
In a defiant speech to delegates attending an international Islamic conference here today, Saddam Hussein accused the United States of trying to act like Rambo in the Middle East. The Iraqi president declared that Americans will be devoured by his forces, that he is not frightened by the more than 500,000 troops opposing him, and he is certain he will achieve victory against them. There was no mention of compromise, no hint he is willing to withdraw from Kuwait. If the Americans want this problem resolved, he said, they must put the Palestinian issue first. They were still shredding classified documents at the U.S. Embassy today as the ranking American diplomat and his skeleton staff made final preparations to fly out tomorrow on a special chartered jet. He appealed to all remaining Americans to leave with him. There are still an estimated 180 U.S. citizens in Iraq.
Given the warlike tone of Saddam Hussein's speech, the UN Secretary General's mission will not be an easy one when he arrives here tomorrow in a last-ditch effort to avoid conflict. Gary Shepard, ABC News, Baghdad.
This morning, the Secretary General exchanged views with European ministers in Geneva on his way to Baghdad as he boarded a plane for the Middle East. Mr. Pérez de Cuéllar said his mission was the last chance for peace. Here's ABC's David Ensor.
Bonne chance.
The European foreign ministers wished the Secretary General good luck, saying they will not make any other diplomatic moves until they hear back from him. Earlier, Pérez de Cuéllar told them he will offer Saddam Hussein a 5-part package. If, by January 15th, Iraq shows convincing evidence that it has started rapid withdrawal of troops from all of Kuwait, the coalition against Iraq promises it will not attack. The coalition withdraws forces too. The UN supplies observers to monitor the withdrawals, and a long-term peacekeeping force excluding American soldiers or others in the coalition. Finally, Pérez de Cuéllar will say once the Gulf crisis is over, he will immediately push for a Middle East conference to solve the Palestinian problem.
Saddam Hussein does not accept this package, that is, in fact,
saying, in other words, that he only wants war. And in that case, war will be, I would say, 100% justified.
The hope is that concessions Iraq's foreign minister did not make to Secretary Baker, Saddam Hussein just might make to the UN's top diplomat.
Acceding to a request of the Secretary General is not buying to a threat or anything like that.
Pérez de Cuéllar says his mission will only succeed if there is goodwill in Baghdad. Translation, if Saddam Hussein is looking for a dignified way out, Pérez de Cuéllar will help him to find it. David Ensor, ABC News, Geneva.
The Bush administration is sending one of its top State Department officials to Israel tomorrow to talk about the Gulf. If there is a war, Israel might end up fighting Iraq. Sandwiched in the middle is Jordan, whose leader, King Hussein, told ABC's Ted Koppel today that both Israel and Iraq should stay clear of his country.
We are determined to prevent any violation of our airspace or our land by any side to this conflict.
There will be more of that interview between Ted and King Hussein later this evening on Nightline. In a moment, Congress getting close to declaring itself on policy in the Gulf. In other news, Soviet tanks and troops have been used in Lithuania. And our person of the week, volunteering for the job. Debate today whether to give President Bush its backing to go to war in the Gulf. Today, members of Congress were not the only ones whose voices were heard on Capitol Hill. Here's ABC's Jim Wooten.
With the Capitol as scenery and body bags as props, anti-war protesters played to the cameras this morning as Congress continued its historic debate.
The comparison of Hitler and Saddam Hussein are very real.
In the House, there was little doubt that the president will have his way in tomorrow's votes. And in the Senate, Democrats like none of Georgia, pessimistic about denying Mr. Bush authority to attack, pressed on nevertheless.
Too fragile to hold together while we attempt a peaceful solution, end quote.
No blood for oil! No blood for oil! No blood for oil! No blood for oil!
The Sergeant-at-Arms will restore order to the galleries.
The protest continued until the Senate galleries were cleared. An ABC News survey now shows the resolution to rely on sanctions instead of force will fail in the Senate, with 44 Democrats voting for it and 41 Republicans and 9 Democrats against it. Republican Hatfield will probably abstain, and 4 senators remain undecided. Late today, the Republican leader Dole was expected to introduce a carbon copy of the House resolution that abandons sanctions and authorizes force against Iraq. And the ABC News survey shows that would probably pass in the Senate as well as the House. So by Sunday, the president will probably have some of what he wants from Congress. Not a formal declaration of war, but a narrow authorization to commit American troops to combat in the Persian Gulf. He planned to do so anyway, with or without congressional permission, but this will tidy things up. Jim Wooten, ABC News, Capitol Hill.
That protest on Capitol Hill today was small, but not by any means the only one. A growing number of Americans are openly challenging the administration's policy for the Gulf. As ABC's John McKenzie reports, the debate occasionally has become heated.
At Pierce College near Los Angeles, a peace march turns into a punching match when a group supporting the war takes on those who don't. Undeterred, anti-war activists say this movement is just gathering steam.
We are going to fill the streets of this country with hundreds of thousands of people in protest if you go to war, Mr.
Today, they protested at Purdue University in Indiana and occupied a congressman's office in Irvine, California.
We haven't tried everything, and we should do that before we declare war.
It's not only individuals, but institutions. Several major trade unions, in an open letter to President Bush, urged him to give the sanctions time to work. In Wichita, Kansas, these high school students held their own emotional debate about whether to fight Saddam Hussein.
If we don't stop him now, what's he going to do later?
And our U.S. soldiers that are over there, they don't want to be over there. They signed up to protect this country. He is not attacking the United States. He's attacking Kuwait. And there's none of
The class voted 25-22 in favor of military action. Even before any shots are fired, many Americans are feeling the anguish of war. John McKenzie, ABC News, New York.
There was another advisory from the State Department today that pro-Iraqi terrorists may be preparing for action in Africa, Asia, or Latin America if war breaks out. Security has been increased at American military installations everywhere. And Israel has been added to the State Department's list of the countries, excuse me, which travelers are being advised to avoid unless they have a compelling reason to be there. We'll be back in just a moment.